The core crew here today, so we'll do that. If you wish to pray with me, as always, please do. We'll let Lynn get her seat. Okay, please pray with me. O Lord Jesus Christ, you are the light of the world. We pray that you would shine your light into our hearts, such that we would become reflectors of your light, followers and imitators of you in all that we do and say, so that all the peoples of the world would come to know you and share in your peace and love. O Lord, may your light shine in the darkness, and may the darkness never overcome it. O blessed Savior, help us to live lives that glorify you. Amen. Okay, so we're going to focus today on the John passage. I think it sounds like we've got some stragglers, we'll call them. No, I know, usually it's 10:15, but we were getting started early today. I'll let you guys come in and...
There was such a long line of people waiting to figure your way.
Oh.
That's what kept us looking at that.
Okay, so we're going to look at John chapter 8, and usually I don't go to the first service, but I did this week because we have something we need to do later today, and Troy set me up nicely. I don't always get to do that, but he had a line towards the end of his sermon where he talked about a wide welcome for all who would listen to Jesus, right? And I think our tendency is to focus in there on the wide welcome part. This passage, this whole big John passage, is very much about that qualifying phrase of a wide welcome for, those who would listen to Jesus, right? Because there's those who wouldn't listen, right? Who don't want to listen. And that's a lot of what's going on in this big John passage. So my other comment is to treat this passage well, we really need to look at a big portion of Scripture, too much that I could get on the handout, right? And I did have the thought that I should start encouraging you all to bring your own Bibles, but it's not a very mainline thing, but maybe we can change that habit, right? Anyway, my point here is John chapters 7 and 8 are really a single unit. It's a big unit, right? But it's kind of one story, and the theme of this whole big section is light, right? So if you're looking on my handout, I've kind of written some of these things just to describe it. Part of the reason why we don't see it as a single unit is something weird happened early in the history of the Bible. So you all know the story of the woman caught in adultery. They're going to stone her. Jesus writes in the sand. So that appears right in the middle of this, chapters 7 through 8, and it disrupts the story because it's not supposed to be there. If you look at my handout, I've given us this is the footnote that shows up in the NIV, which is an American Evangelical Translation. So this isn't some liberal comment, right? This is just kind of a very established biblical studies principle. And what do they say? The earliest manuscripts and many other ancient witnesses don't have John 7:50 through 8:11. So the earliest copies of the Bible we have, this story is not there. It moves. Sometimes it occurs after John chapter 7, verse 36. Sometimes it occurs at the very end of the Gospel of John. It's the last thing. It's like an appendix. And then in some manuscripts, it actually shows up in the Gospel of Luke. So what it is a story that was there very early on, but it wasn't part of any of the written Gospels. And people kept telling it. And people were like, we got to get this in there somehow. And at some point, some editor added it in, and this is where it's stuck. And it's a good story. I think it's true. It just doesn't belong here, right? It's kind of, it should, actually, if I was in charge, when you got to the end of the Gospel of John, there'd be this just a separate book that would have just these like 12 verses, right? It's a story that exists independently. Some editor added it in and it's stuck, right? But the problem what it does here is it disrupts this big story that we have of light and darkness, right? That Jesus is talking about. And to sort of get us into that, I want to read a quote from a good commentator, a good Scottish Presbyterian. I've had 2 conversations this morning already about Scotland, so that's good.
Just always trying.
Right. Anyway, so here's what Leslie Knubigan says. He says, we have now seen, so he's talking about if we're reading through the Gospel of John up until this point, we have now seen how the words of Jesus has the power to test men's desires and to sift their thoughts, so that the true believers are distinguished from those who follow Jesus because they are attracted by his miracles. And again, we saw this last week. We talked about the feeding of the 5,000. The crowd is in there because they really have faith in Jesus. They're there because he's working wonders, and they like free food and health care, right? So they're really there for what he can do for them, not because of who Jesus is. And that theme is going to be here too. It's actually a huge theme in the Gospel of John, right? So to keep going, we have seen the sifting and the testing pressed right in the center of Jesus' company to the 12 themselves. We now come to, so again, if we're going to read John in chapter 6, so this before this, we get the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus, at the end of that, he starts talking about, you need to eat me. And a bunch of his disciples, not the 12, we actually learned he's got a whole bunch more. A bunch of them leave. They're not a part of his movement anymore because they think he's nuts. This guy's telling us to eat him. Like, what is he talking about, right? So people are beginning to abandon this movement, at least some are, right? And again, this is right into his crew. And of course, we're going to get Judas. John is setting us up for all that. We know we now come to a long passage in which the crisis created by the presence of the light in the midst of the darkness of the world creates an almost unbearable tension. We see the light shining in the darkness, and the darkness seeking to destroy it. Right? So that's really the theme in this whole big section. And I'm not going to read all this, but the comment, one way to think of what John is doing, what this commentator is doing, is they're pointing to this fact, which is a huge theme in John's gospel, is the enemy is inside. The whole point is that actually the people who are going to undermine the movement aren't the outsiders, it's the insiders, right? And it's because they're going to resist the movement, right? So there's this huge theme again of light and darkness, and the idea is the darkness has to be exposed, right? We're going to keep coming back to this, but I want to just set the stage with that, right? So we can dive into this passage. The other big set of observations I want to make is this is really I title this class, whatever we're going to call it, how to read the Bible. And this is where I want to give you guys some tips on how to actually read the Bible, right? So this will apply everywhere, right? So we tend to read the Bible piecemeal, especially if we read it devotionally, which I'm not going to discourage you from doing at all, right? But we tend to read it in small little pieces, right? But it oftentimes comes in big books. And if you don't also read it in that sort of bigger way rather than just little pieces at a time, you miss some of the big themes, right? So John's gospel has a bunch of big themes where if we just dive into it, we're not going to catch that these themes are going over these huge passages, right? So, John is a book where you should probably read it in 2 sittings. There's a first part and a second part. It's pretty much split down the middle. But if you kind of just pick it up little piece at a time, you're going to miss how some of these big themes poke out, right? So here's the first one here is light and darkness. So I've got some quotes underneath my kind of opening paragraph, right? We get 5 verses into this gospel, and we read, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. And if you would keep reading at least through chapter 12, you're going to keep getting themes of light and darkness. It's a constant. It's a major, major theme that then completely disappears in part 2. So you get to chapter 13, which is the start of this other part of the gospel, right? And that theme disappears, kind of. Where it really doesn't disappear is the whole theme is Jesus being glorified, which is, of course, a light. But it's the darkness, really, that disappears. Scholars like to refer to the first part of John's Gospel as the book of signs. And what Jesus is doing in this first part, it's Jesus' public ministry, and it's pretty much focused on him doing miracles, right? He heals the paralytic at the pool in chapter 5. In chapter 6, he's feeding the 5,000. Chapter 7, he's going to start arguing with the Pharisees, but it's very public, right? So it's all these public things, and he's doing signs, kind of telling the world who he is. We get to chapter 13, which is right in the middle, and the first thing that happens really is the Last Supper. So, I mean, the second half of John's Gospel is just the Passion. It's basically Thursday through the Sunday. So half of it is like 3 years, and the second half is 3 or 4 days, right? The themes really shift. In that first half, he's publicly teaching. He's got all these disciples. He's preaching to all of these people. In the second half, it's in a room with the 12, and he's teaching just them. So you kind of get this big public of Jesus, and then you get the insider of Jesus, right? And the themes change, right? The other thing is, like I just told you, like this light and darkness theme disappears in the second half, but it really doesn't, because the whole theme is Jesus being glorified, right? So in John, this is one thing that's really kind of to pay attention to. The cross is not something in which is a sign of a shame. He actually plays on this double entendre of Jesus being lifted up. So he's lifted up and put on the cross, but it's also him being glorified. So for John, when Jesus is on the cross, that's the highlight. That's where we really see who he is. And the Father is glorifying him. And that's where he's fully revealed as God. So John doesn't see the cross as a bad thing. It's actually, here's who Jesus is. He's the crucified one for you and me, right? So that's where that theme goes, right? But again, I just want to point out this is a big theme throughout the first half of the book. And if we just dive in here and we forget there were 6 chapters earlier, we're kind of going to miss some of this theme, right? We're going to miss it. It's a major theme. There's another one. So if you look at my handout, towards the bottom of the first page, I've given us part of chapter 7. And it begins with, after this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He did not wish to go about in Judea because the Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. So we got a couple things we need to say. First, the Jews. Who are they? But yeah, you're right. It's a technical term here being used to say this is the Pharisees or the teachers of the law, the authorities, because of course Jesus is a Jew. The disciples are Jews. Everybody in the story is a Jew, right? So to say the Jews, right? But it's setting up a dichotomy. There's those who follow Jesus, and there's those who don't, right? Who are actually opposed to him, right? And that's again a big theme in John's Gospel, right? Why do they want to kill Jesus? If we go all the way back to chapter 5, there wasn't room to put all this on the handout, but back there is when Jesus heals the paralytic at the pool of Bethsaida. What day does he heal him? the Sabbath, right? It's a big test. Where they're actually seeing what he would do. And of course, after he does this, they want to kill him. I did put chapter 5, verse 18 on there. And for this reason, Jesus healing on the Sabbath, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, therefore making himself equal to God. So Jesus is breaking rules that people don't like. He's a rebel, to quote Troy's sermon here again. And so they're seeking to kill him. And that theme really comes out here. If you turn the handout over, I put these in bold towards the middle. So Jesus actually tells them, I know that you are descendants of Abraham, yet you look for an opportunity to kill me because there is no place in you for my word. Right? And then if we go down to the big bold, he has this whole conversation with them about you're trying to kill me. So this is a theme, again, that goes all throughout the first half of John's gospel. Actually, all of it, because of course at the end, they do kill him, right? But again, it's this big theme, right? And it shows up in other places too. I mean, Jesus is foretelling his death. He's going on this long tirade. If we go back again to that chapter 5 verse, why do they want to kill him? He healed on the Sabbath, and he's making himself equal to God. Well, at the very end of this story, we have again this big, long 2-chapter argument he has with the Jews. At the very end, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am. This is something we've talked about in here before, and you probably heard before, but either Jesus is very poor at grammar, he needs Katie to be his editor, right? Or he's making a point, right? And of course he's making a point. He's referring to the burning bush in Exodus where God says, I am. So Jesus is saying, I'm that guy. And that's idolatry if it isn't true. So the appropriate response is to stone him, and he gets away, right? I personally think verse 59 here is one of the funniest verses in the whole Bible. They picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. He hides. I mean, what is he doing? Playing hide and seek, right? I mean, it's kind of silly, but actually it's there because it brings up another big theme, right? We get this whole theme of light and darkness, right? John is just constantly talking about Jesus hiding himself, right? Unless he reveals himself to you, you don't understand who he is, right? So he hides himself. He reveals himself, right? If we go back on the first page of my handout again, chapter 7, right? Jesus is in Galilee, so that's where Nazareth is. It's way up north, right? It's where Jesus grew up, right? All of his disciples are from Galilee. So in the other Gospels, the first kind of half of them, when Jesus is doing all his stuff, he's not in Jerusalem, he's up in Galilee. It's like this rural backwater place. He's got an accent. That's why people can tell who he is, where he's from, right? Peter, remember Peter denies Jesus 3 times. They can tell that he's one of Jesus' followers because he has an accent, right? He's from the north, right? And so, but even there, what does Jesus say? There's going to be this big festival, and you have to go down to Jerusalem for this festival, right? And so, yeah, well, that's where it happens. I mean, you can do it now elsewhere, but like in Jesus' day, you would travel to go, right? And he tells us he isn't going to go, at least at first, because his brothers say to him, that might shock us, right? Jesus has brothers. So we as Protestants don't think Mary was a virgin forever. She and Joseph had their own kids, but his brothers say to him, leave here and go to Judea, which is where Jerusalem is, so that your disciples, this here probably means the big group of followers, not the 12, right? That they will see the works you are doing, for no one who wants to be widely known acts in a secret. If you do these things, show yourselves to the world, right? And then we get a editorial insight. For not even his brothers believed in him. This sounds kind of odd. So his brothers clearly recognize he can do miracles. And they want him to go show off. If I had a brother who could do miracles, I might want him to do that too. Maybe I can cash in on this and sell merch. That's kind of what they're doing, right? They want to cash in on what he's capable of, right? And John tells us this is a sign that they don't really have a faith. Again, they're like the crowds at the feeding of the 5,000. They're there for what Jesus can do for them, not who he really is. Yeah, Hal.
Do you know how many brothers he had?
No, we don't know. It just says her brothers. More than one. And we know one is James. James is called the brother of Jesus, right? But we don't know how many other ones there are. Dale?
It just struck me when it says, we're not even brothers believe that. That's like Joseph, his brother.
Yeah. Yep. So they think there's things that are supposed to be similar, right? And this is clearly a problem because it shows up mostly in the Gospel of Mark, but it is elsewhere of, his family thinks he's crazy. There's actually a scene where Mary and his brothers and sisters come. There's sisters too. And he's in a room teaching, and they tell him to come out. They want him to stop all this crazy stuff. And his response is, well, who are my brother and sister and my mother? Those who do the will of my Father in heaven. He basically writes them off. It's they who end up coming back later, probably after he died, right? Kathy?
I always think it's kind of weird that Mary knew who Jesus really was. We assume
Yep.
that from what we hear.
Yep. Right.
And then I'm thinking, what does she think about him later? Does that part of him, does she want him to be human and not who she really is?
Well, there's at least a period of time where she tries to stop him. The Gospels tell us that, right? And again, they do know who he is. I'm sure she the angel came and told me I was going to be pregnant, and I hadn't been with a man. This kid's special, clearly, right? But she's got expectations of what that role is going to be, and he doesn't always fit them.
But he doesn't, I think she feels that he's coming to his death, and she doesn't.
Well, yeah, she doesn't want him to die, right? They all don't want him. But that's part of the point, and John's Gospel really highlights this. Everybody around Jesus, even his closest followers, have expectations of how they think he's going to do what he's called to do, and it doesn't fit. And at some point, they all betray him in some way. There's Peter, right, in the sort of glorious phase, but in a certain sense, that story is focused on because he's the head disciple. I think we should assume all the rest of them did this in their own way, right? And as readers of the gospel, I think we're being encouraged to take a step back and say, and how are we betraying him? I really do think that's part of what's happening with these stories, right? But anyway, we get this other theme of Jesus hides, right? They basically, again, they want him to do all of these things, but even here, what does he do? He says, I'm not going to go down. Then he does, but he does it in a secret. He hides himself, right? And then we don't have this, I couldn't put it all in the handout, but then in the middle of chapter 7, he just shows up in the temple and starts teaching. After everyone is like, where's Jesus? We thought he'd be here. There's this whole argument between people who are following him and the Pharisees. They're arguing, is he a prophet? Is he the Christ? Is he a deceiver, right? Everyone's arguing about who he is, and he shows up and launches into this I am the light of the world speech, right? This is just what's happening, right? And again, everybody's not clear on who Jesus really is, right? Even his closest followers are trying to figure out, like, who exactly is he? What's he going to do? And in a certain sense, what happens here is this big reveal, right? The light shines. Hell.
That's true today. There are a lot of people.
Right. Well, and even, I think those of us in this room want to say again that we think we know who Jesus is, right? But I think, again, part of the point is Jesus is going to continue to surprise us, right?
I think some people give their own.
Absolutely, right? But one of the things that we should take away from this is we're not in control of who Jesus is. Right? The church isn't in control of who Jesus is. We follow him. We don't make him into who we want him to be. That's where we get into trouble, right? Yeah. And again, that's the point of this is all these other people, especially the Jews, have this expectation of who the Messiah is going to be. And Jesus is saying, you've got it wrong, right? Hal, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think if Jesus were here and he asked me to define who he is, he'd get a big laugh out of it.
Well, if Jesus was here and asked me that question, I would just quote his own words at him. And then he would probably say, but do you understand what that means? Right? And I don't think I'd have it all right.
Yeah, just give the name you are.
Yep.
There's no wrong answer.
I am who I am.
Well, I can think of a couple.
But this is part of what Jesus is doing here. He's actually going to say, like, all of you, from the Jews, again, this category Jews is the religious authorities. They're in flat out opposition to him. They're trying to kill him. Right? And this is quick aside. One of the dangers of John's gospel is it uses this category, the Jews. Right? And actually that's been used historically to support Christian persecution of Jews, right? Because we're already reading into it this idea of there's a church and there's the Jews. And they're two separate things. That does not exist in Jesus' day. They're all Jews. They're all part of the same faith community. The authorities are opposed to him. He's having to, so opposed they're trying to kill him from the very start of the gospel, really, right? And then even his closest followers, who obviously aren't trying to kill him, they're trying to follow him. They're trying to stop him from being killed, actually, right? They don't get who he is either, right? So there really is this kind of a problem of there are people who are flat out opposed to him, and then his closest followers are actually impeding him often. Yep, Dale.
Just changing off of that, you're making me think this way, that then the two resistances to Jesus, his enemies because they fear him,
Yep.
But his own followers because they think he's mad. He's going too far.
Going too far.
And they want to protect him. It's kind of like, well, Mary's saying, Jesus is doing crazy things.
Yep.
We need to go rein him in.
Yep.
And Peter doing the same
Right.
thing.
And his brothers too. Again, this is, John is purposely just highlighting every possible group, right? His family doesn't really believe in him, right? They know what he's capable of. They've seen him do amazing things, right? But they want to capitalize on it. They want him to go do this stuff publicly because they want him to become famous. Jesus' answer is, my time isn't here yet, right? That's actually I was talking about the two parts of the Gospel of John, right? It's on my handout here, on one of the bullet points. Verse 13.1, which is the start of the second part of the Gospel. Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And this is the start of, he basically starts drawing attention to himself, so he gets killed. right? If you go to the very next one I have on there, this is way back in chapter 10. Jesus says, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I have the power to lay it down. I have the power to take it up again." I mean, he's telling us, I'm in control of when you all kill me. This is part of the plan. I'm in charge here. Nobody else is in charge. It's kind of what he's telling us, right? And again, everybody's trying to get him to be somebody else, right? Yep.
I'm a little troubled by your interpretation of what the brothers wanted him to do.
Yep.
Because it kind of goes against the way I've interpreted that passage my whole Christian life. I've always thought that they were being satirical. Why don't you go down, and be a show-off. That's what you want to be anyway. But you say, no, they wanted to profit from him.
I think we can maybe take it the way you're reading it, but I'm going to lean the other way. Like, I think I mean, again, the family would know he's special, right? I mean, I'm assuming Mary told them at some point what happened. They've seen him do things, right? I mean, because they're saying, like, so that your disciples also may see the works you're doing. So I can see how that would be satirical, right? But they're at least saying, you're doing things that we can't explain, right? I think they're telling him to go, because the family would have gone to this festival every year. They're clearly a family of faithful Jews, right? And if we keep, I don't have this on the handout, but it would come after in the rest of chapter 7. There's this whole debate of the people who are there at the festival are wondering where he is. Like, it's expected he's going to come up and make a spectacle. And he's like, my time isn't here yet, right? And again, I think what John is trying to tell us is Jesus is in control. Like, he isn't going to go down and walk into this situation where he knows they're trying to kill him in a way where he doesn't have control over it. So what does he do? He shows up and just appears when he wants to, surprises them, right? And then we're told, this is on the back side of the page, like, they don't arrest him because his time has not yet come, right? I think that's what John is doing, right? Go ahead, Cheryl.
Even at the beginning of his ministry with the water and the wine, his mother is saying,
yeah,
do what he tells you.
Yeah, I mean,
He'll tell you, do what he tells you to do.
Yeah.
And so she has some inkling that he can do this.
But didn't Jesus respond?
My
time is not yet here, right? I mean, so this is, again, this is my point. Like, see how that theme of hiddenness is already here. It's there in the first miracle of, right? Jesus is telling us, I am not here to draw attention to myself until the appropriate time, right? He's hanging out in these rural areas performing miracles, right? I mean, I can't come up with a good contemporary analogy because this is so strange, right? But it would be like if we were getting reports of some miracle worker from some really isolated third world country, right? And you're hearing the news and you're like, this isn't true, this is weird, this is just some backward people believing in things, right? So if you go to the big city, Jerusalem, people have clearly heard about Jesus. He's got a reputation. He's been down there before and done some things, right? But they're mostly hearing it secondhand. And again, I think he's being encouraged. Hey, the time is like people are pushing him into this for various reasons, right? I mean, Peter wants him to do certain things. We get the two disciples who want him to call down fire from heaven to destroy their enemies, right? Judas, I think it's fairly clear, kills Jesus because he thinks Jesus is going to be revolutionary. And he's going to take over and they're going to destroy Rome. And when Jesus says, that's not what I'm going to do, Judas says, well, then we'll make you a martyr to get the movement started. I think that's what he's up to, right? everybody wants him to be something else. And again, what John is really making that clear, right? So let's focus on what he actually means by being the light of the world in the time we have left, right? So he says, starts this big speech. I'm the light of the world. All right, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life, right? And what's been happening prior to this, again, is they've been arguing about who Jesus is. The Pharisees have actually asked the temple guards to go arrest him and bring him into the inner sanctuary, right? And this is his response, right? Again, if you were in the first service, Troy pointed out that we're at this big festival, which was something of a spectacle. Of the whole temple area is really well lit. There's these huge lamps. It was considered a wonder of the world. So I mean, again, you're in a world without electricity. The whole town is ablaze, right, with a light. And Jesus is saying, I'm the light, right? I mean, he's very good at pointing to things that are happening right now and sort of applying them, right? So he says, I'm the light of the world. And they respond by saying, you're testifying on your own behalf. Your testimony is not valid, right? So we get into a court case. The Pharisees, in a certain sense, are right. If you go to court, and especially under the Jewish law, you need 2 witnesses. You can't be your own co-witness, right? If someone accuses me of stealing, and they've got, evidence of me robbing a bank, it's not enough for me to say I didn't do it, right? I would have to have a witness who says, no, he wasn't there, he was in this other place. I can testify to that, right? So they're saying, you can't just tell us this. You need other witnesses. And what does Jesus do? He says, even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid because I know where I have come from and where I am going, but you do not know where I am coming from or where I am going. You judge by human standards, I judge no one. Yet if I do judge, this is kind of Jesus at his most complicated, I don't judge, but if I do, right? The judgment is valid, for it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law it is written that the testimony of 2 witnesses is valid. I testify on my own behalf, and the Father who sent me testifies on my behalf. So we get into this very strange argument, which I want to unpack a bit, right? And again, this emerges if you read the whole gospel a little more carefully, and you need a kind of a good background of the Old Testament and Jewish law. But Jesus is basically saying something like this. Why do we need a witness in the first place? Because people lie. Right? That's why you need a witness. The world is full of darkness. People lie. Right? So that's why we need other witnesses. But if the world is full of darkness, then, and the truth is coming from outside of the world, then no one in the world is actually a reliable witness. Witnesses can lie too. Right? We need a light from outside. We need a witness from outside, right? So
2 people see the same thing.
Right. Well, but the whole point is there isn't anybody in the world who can reliably testify to who Jesus is, because and this is the point that's being made. Everybody's trying to turn him into somebody else, right? So he's basically saying, I testify because I came from somewhere else. We go back to the very, very beginning of the gospel. The Word was with God, and the Word was God, and he came down and became flesh and dwelt among us. And of course, the Father is in heaven, right? So we get witnesses from outside, right? This isn't going to hold up in court, but that's a human court. That's his whole point, right? I don't judge by human standards. And they've already judged him. The Pharisees want to kill him here, right? They've already basically said, we're going to kill you. You're guilty of blasphemy and all these things, right? But Jesus is saying the truth is here, the light is here. It's being testified to. They respond by saying, what? Where is your Father? Which could potentially be a dig. Maybe somebody who knows the family backstory. Joseph isn't his real dad. There's this whole complicated thing with Mary, right? So it could be like a elbow of, well, where's your dad? We know all about you, right? And he ignores this, right? And says, you know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. And Jesus is again basically saying, for us at least as readers, you guys don't really know God. Because that's what Jesus is talking about his Father. He's talking about God the Father, right? So again, he's in the temple saying all these things. They don't arrest him. He then foretells his own death, right? They seem to think he's going to commit a suicide. This kind of just feeds their point, right? And then he continues. If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth. The truth will make you free, right? So he's just getting into these deep debates back and forth, right? And again, he's using a language that they don't understand, right? I mean, a good example of this, he says elsewhere, if you tear down this temple, I will build it up in three days. What do they think he's talking about? The big temple building, right? Of course, he's talking about his own body. But in so doing that, what is he doing? He's saying, where is God really present? Not in the temple, the building, but in this temple, he's saying, right? I am where God is to be found. And that's actually what the whole rest of this passage is about. He's saying, I'm where God is to be found. If you want to know the Father, you need to know me, right? And then again, this is all what he's doing here is like human standards can't get you to this point, right? The whole concept here is God is coming from outside of the world. It's a light shining in from outside of the world, right? The big theological word for this is revelation. God reveals God's self. And I like to tell my seminary students, when God really reveals himself to us, it's like a slap in the face. It comes from outside. It's a surprise, and it's something we don't have control over. God reveals himself to us, right, in ways that we don't expect, and in ways that are hard for us to understand, right? And so when Jesus says, I don't judge, in a certain sense, he's like, what he means is, I don't judge by human standards. I don't judge anybody by human standards. His very presence is a judgment on the fact that the world is dark. It needs a light, right? I mean, the world is full of sin and evil and all kinds of things, and Jesus says, I'm here to expose it. I'm going to shine a light on it and call you to follow me. Dale.
When you say that it's like a slap,
Yep.
something coming in from the outside, the word kairos, the Greek word kairos in the New Testament, I once did a study of that just using concordance and stuff, but it seemed like it's often an opening.
Yep.
It seems like something opens.
Yep.
And it also seems like it breaks up chronos, the other kind of time. So this is a God time, a break in chronos.
It's disruptive. I mean, that's the idea, is like God is breaking into our time, our world, and disrupting things, right? Which again, this is what Jesus does, right? He's constantly disrupting everybody's ideas of what God is going to do, what the Messiah is going to be. Everything's upended, right? And again, I think for us, the lesson is, right, we think we know what God is going to do, what God wants of us. And the point is, Jesus will often disrupt that. Doug?
This notion of Jesus recognizing the sin of the world, and darkness and everything, isn't that an evangelical sort of thought about how we are? The other Christians, so to speak, they claim that we're the sin and we're not following the right path.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the problem with this, right, is you can again say, yes, Jesus is here to disrupt, but we're on team Jesus and you aren't.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to do, but I mean, I think, again, if we read the gospel as a whole and pay attention, everybody's wrong. Right? At some point, everybody gets it wrong, even his closest followers. Right? It's not just his enemies; his closest followers get it wrong too. I mean, Peter tries to stop him. I mean, notice what Jesus does here, right? He, in the big part I have bold on the back page, right? Jesus is arguing with them. He says, "If you're Abraham's children, you would do what Abraham did, but now you're trying to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. So you think you're following Abraham. You're not following Abraham." I mean, I always think this sounds like two kids saying, "My dad can beat up your dad," right? "You are indeed doing what your father does," they said to him. "We are not illegitimate children. We have one Father, God himself." Jesus said, "If God were your Father, you would love me, for I came from God and now I'm here. I did not come on my own, but he sent me. Why do you not understand what I say? It is because you cannot accept my word. You are from your father, the devil." Pretty harsh. Right? But notice he does the same thing to Peter. "Get behind me, Satan." Right? I mean, he calls the enemies who are trying to kill him, he calls them Satan. His closest friend and companion and follower, he calls a Satan. Because they both get it. They both get it wrong, right? They don't understand who he is and what he's about, right? So I mean, Doug, to get to your point, I mean, the evangelicals, like, they've actually got this partially right. Jesus is saying, right, I have to come into the world and get in your face and disrupt, right? They just are arrogant and assume they have it right, that they've got it, right, that they're on team Jesus, right? And again, Jesus, this goes back to this whole thing about Jesus saying, in the court case and the testifying, we can't testify because we're part of the darkness in the world. This is hard. This is heavy stuff. But I mean, Jesus is getting right in our face right here and saying, like, right, verse 45, "Because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Which of you convicts me of sin? If I tell you the truth, why do you not believe me?" I mean, he's just stacking things up, right? And how do they respond? They basically hurl racial insults at him and tell him he has a demon, right? You're a Samaritan and have a demon, right? Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father and you dishonor me." I mean, again, it's this kind of just back and the forth, right? And it ends, again, this is the big reveal. They ask him, "Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? The prophets also died. Who do you claim to be?" I mean, the essential thing here, the question is, who is Jesus? He's finally going to tell us, right? "Your ancestor Abraham rejoiced that he would to see my day. He saw it and was glad. They said to him, 'You're not yet 50, and you've seen Abraham. Now we know you're crazy.' And Jesus says, 'Very truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am.'" We already talked about this, right? He says, "Yep, I'm God." So they picked up stones to throw him, and he plays a really good game of hide and seek, right? But again, this is the point of he can hide. He can put this, I mean, he can hide and take himself out of the attention. I think I think we're supposed to think this is another miracle. He's not just like good at getting behind people and putting on a cloak, right? He's able to make it so they can't see him. They can't get. Yeah, I mean, this is the point. Yeah.
It reminds me of the incident where at the synagogue, they're trying to throw him off the cliff.
Right, and he just walks through the crowd. Yeah.
Yeah.
He parts the crowd like
it's like
the Red Sea. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And again, that's the point, right? And again, notice all of the Gospels are going to tell us different versions of the same story, but they're all making the same point, right? Of people want to be around Jesus because of all the things he can do for them. And then when he doesn't play their game anymore and starts talking about things where they think he's crazy, they try to kill him, right? And I think this is the point of we need to ask ourselves, why are we following Jesus, right? And if you ask them why do you believe in Jesus, if your answer is so I don't go to hell when I die, right? You turn Jesus into an instrument to help you achieve a goal. He's the tool to get to where you want to go. Jesus' whole point is, I'm not the tool, I'm the goal.
It's a transaction.
Right, but that's Jesus' whole point. I'm the one you should be giving your attention to. I'm the one you want to focus on. I'm not there to get you somewhere. I'm the destination.
Well, at about the time when this shifting from the first part to the second part in John, I believe it's about there where Jesus said, and if I be lifted up, will draw all men to myself.
Yep.
And then you had said the lifting up is the cross. The cross is his glorification. So, again, I've just been reading a little bit about the way of the cross, like Bonhoeffer's view, that we need to live. I guess it's an adaptation of Luther in some way. But the way of the cross is that we take up the cross and we follow him every day, but it's not that the cross gets us to heaven, it's that the cross calls us to God's suffering in this world and to participate in that suffering.
So, this is exactly right? Think about what Jesus is going to do. What does he call his followers to do? Imitate me. Mm-hmm. Right? Again, when we get to chapter 13, when we get to the part where there's the whole shift, what does Jesus do in the Gospel of John at the Last Supper? Your hint is we do this on Maundy Thursday. Washes their feet, right? He says, and he's got all these things in him, but I came here to serve, not to be served, right? So his message is, I'm not here to draw attention to myself as kind of the end in itself, right? I'm not here to get glory. The Father gives me glory because I'm faithful and obedient to him. But that's not my goal. My goal is to be faithful. Jesus is telling us that should be your goal too, right? That's why he can tell us things like, take up your cross and follow me, right? You're also supposed to be doing what you do in a service of others, right? Love your neighbor, love God, right? That's the kind of thing he's telling us to do. But again, I'm not going to, this is one of these things where I think it's really easy for us to point at other people. Right? I could give you a whole list of people from, various churches I've been a part of who I look at them and I'm like, you're here doing things in order to draw attention to yourself. You're here because you're getting something out of this, right? That's why you're really here, right? Rather than here to serve other people, whether it benefits you or not, right? And as soon as I say that, I start going in my head, what about all the ways I do that too? I think that's the point, right? But it's this constant call of get your eyes on me. I'm the light, right? Follow me, right? And stop turning it into what benefit do you get from me? Right? That's not why we follow him. We follow him because he's the truth. Right?
Yet it's important to recognize the things that you
Yeah. But so this is one way we could end this, right? I mean, think of all these people are following Jesus because they're hoping to get something from him. I think the better way to understand this is Jesus is basically saying, I've already given you everything you need. I have died for you. Your salvation is accomplished. Right? You don't need anything else from me. I've given it to you freely. Take it. Right? All we have to give back at this point is thanksgiving. Jesus says, if you want to thank me for what I've done for you, then imitate me. Love your neighbor. Love God. Right? So, and then I think this is where the works part comes in. It's like, again, everybody's following him around, and like the crowds are enthused. They're going to great lengths to follow him, right? But we're actually told that's not a faith. Because they're following him just to get stuff, right? Jesus is saying, if you have faith, you know I've already given you everything. And again, I want to point out, this isn't a point that I have grasped the intellectual idea of this. This is a constant sort of Christian exercise of, what am I doing? Why am I following Jesus? Right? Because we will constantly betray ourselves and say, what am I getting out of this? Right? Why do you come to church? Well, I like the fellowship, and my friends are there, and the cookies sure taste good, and the music is nice, and right? I mean, all good things, right? But that's not the ultimate point, right?
It's so human that
right.
it's almost stifling.
Yeah.
Because you know in your gut it's never going to happen.
Right? But again, I think we can tie all this together with, what is Jesus, and the Old Testament too, what is God constantly telling us? It's stop nasal gazing and only care about yourself, and go love your neighbor. That's the point, right? And we too quickly turn this into it's my personal relationship with Jesus that gets me into heaven when I die. And Jesus doesn't really even talk about that. Right? Anyway, we can harp on this over and over again, but that's what's going on here. Yes. Yeah, the next week is the generosity brunch. So you should go to that rather than coming here. We won't have a class.